Last night, I had a horrible dream. I don't even understand how my brain formulates these things. There's only one thing that kind of makes sense, and I'll explain it. But most of this just doesn't make sense at all. But I gotta tell it because it just, I gotta get it off my mind. Sometimes these dreams are just a little much, and talking about them helps me reflect on them later about maybe what to do or not to do. Last night I had a dream. Right before I went to bed, there was this stupid Facebook video where people get their kids to say things, and then they'll put it online, be like, "Oh, my kid said this. What's wrong with them?" You know, this woman, she says to her son, and you can't even actually see her son. He's like bent over, so it might not have even been him talking at the moment. She could have just voiced it over. But she goes, "Honey, do you remember when you were born?" And he goes, "No. Do you remember when I crawled from hell?" And then, of course, she looks concerned, like, "Oh my goodness, is my kid possessed by the devil?" You know, or something. Well, when I watched that video, you know, it was like a 15-second video. And I didn't really think much of it, other than, that's stupid. Well, last night I had a dream that my buddy Clay invited me over to his apartment to catch up, because oh, that's a dog. Stay in your yard. 2 dogs. He invited me over to his apartment to catch up, because I was friends with him from like 3rd grade up until 9th grade. For some reason, we had this stupid fight. When I was in elementary school, it was me and Clay, and then I knew Darren through church. And then Darren had a friend, I believe, at Blue Star Elementary. I hope I'm getting this right. My window's frozen shut. Perfect. He had a buddy from Blue Star where he went. And when we got to middle school, we all went to the same school. So now, me and Darren and Keegan was Darren's buddy, and Clay, we were all 4 of us were like the best of friends. We all were just cool. We went and did stuff together. We went to lock-ins together. Like, we were cool with each other. But for some reason, Keegan did something to Darren when we were like in 9th grade, that Darren, like, Keegan was like, thought they were play fighting, and Darren didn't think that they were. When he tried to say he was sorry, and Darren wouldn't accept his apology, and Clay sided with Darren, and I sided with Keegan, because I was like, hey, you know, he's trying to say he's sorry, and Darren wouldn't have it. So then Clay quit talking to me. This is the way it happened in real life. Well, I work with Clay now. Sort of. he's actually an engineer at Herman Miller, but he works in a different department. From time to time, he'll come down and I'll see him. He'll be working on a project. Well, in the dream, Clay invited me back to his house to catch up, play N64. And so I come over, and I'm like, oh, where's the N64? And he was like, oh, it's in my room. And I went into his room, and he had taken like the body of an old Mopar and like put red fabric all over the outside of it and made it super like custom looking. And I'm like, is this your bed? Because he had turned it into like you open the door, or maybe it was a convertible, and you can climb into the bed. He's like, yeah. And he's like, hang on a minute, I'm gonna go get something. So like I just started kind of checking his apartment out, not like looking into his things or anything, but just taking in the decor and everything. And he comes back in his underwear and like a tight white t-shirt, and I'm like thinking, okay, that's weird, but maybe he wanted to get comfortable. I don't know. Well, then he lays down on the bed and like he starts jokingly coming on to me, and oh my gosh, I can't even believe I'm gonna like say these things. He's like, if we were gay, we could have sex right now. And I was like, yeah, good thing we're not. And he just kind of stared at me with like this smirk on his face. I'm like, okay, so where's the N64? And he just stared at me. And I'm like, okay, I'll find it myself. So I found it and started playing, and he just kept staring at me. And I'm like, at some point, I kind of looked at, because I put like a Star Wars game in and I was playing it. And he just kept staring at me, and I looked at him at some point and just said, so are we gonna play or what's going on? And he looked at me and just said, your sons are in hell, through that door, if you want to go get them. And like all of a sudden a door appeared like on the wall, and it had like burnt edges, and like you could just feel the heat emanating off of it. And I opened it, and I could just, this is the part where it really gets scary. My dreams always start out like this. They start out normal, and then they just descend into lunacy and chaos. I opened the door, and you could hear like people weeping and wailing, and it was just hot. And I closed the door, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And he was like, it's the door to hell. I'm like, well, how do you have the door to hell in your apartment? He's just said, well, let's just say I traded my soul to the devil for money. So I have plenty of money coming in from various sources. But the devil also said I had to become gay, which I was fine with, because I don't have a girlfriend anyway, so it doesn't even matter. But yeah, your sons are in hell. They went to hell the moment that you came in the door. It's through that door. If you could stand the heat, you can go get them. And I'm like, well, I gotta go in there. You know, I can't leave my boys in hell. So, like, I think Emily was, like, out and about, like, running errands, and I called her. And I said, you need to come to this place right now. So she came, and I told her exactly what was going on. And, like, when she came in the door, somehow, like, I instantly received, like, a video in my brain. Like, time stood still, and I received a video in my brain, and I just went over, like I was seeing through her eyes. I was seeing all the thrift shopping that she had done. Because that's what she was doing. She was out thrift shopping. And, like, she had gotten a couple of good deals on toys for the boys, and she had gotten a pair of sweatpants for herself. And I think she found, like, a golden Nerf gun for me. And she was going to surprise me with it. So I told her, my buddy here sold his soul to the devil. And the minute that you come in the door, someone that you care about goes to hell. And Clay said, oh no, it's not just anybody, it's only the heads of the household, and only their sons go. And Emily said, well, I have Asher with me. And so she showed me that she had Asher. And she said, so this guy is lying. Whatever he says, he's lying. All of our sons didn't go to hell. He's just full of crap. And he said, oh, I didn't know about that one. What's his name? And I said, I'm not going to tell you his name. He's like, your wife said it, didn't she? What was it? I said, I'm not going to tell you. He's like, oh, you figured it out. I have to know their names in order to send them there. But they're in there. And, like, we looked at the daycare app, and it had just said, instead of saying Justin Callan had checked out, it just said they were done. It just said Justin Hitchcock is done. Callan Hitchcock is done. And, like, Emily started bawling, and I'm like, I gotta go in there, Emily. He's like, well, what if you don't come back? I said, well, I have God on my side. I know He'll help me find him. And Clay just kind of laughed. Well, I opened this door, and in order to go in, I had to also close the door. So I went in there and closed the door. And it was so hot that, like, my eyes were watering. And the floor was super, super hot. Even though I had shoes on, you had to, like, take quick steps in order to not burn your feet. The best way, I mean, I can describe this is like something out of a Doom video game or something. There were, like, people who had, like, these little black horns. Oh, there we go, it's working. People who had these little black horns on their head, and they were, like, running around screaming. And when they saw me, they were like, you're from the outside. How did you get here? I didn't answer them. And, like, there were all these doors. And so I would open a door, and there would be, like, these metal oven grates where, like, really bad people were forced to just lay there and bake. open another door, and there was like a stereo system just on fire. And like there were these stairs that I had to go down. And like way, way down below, it was like on Mustafar. There was like a great big lake of fire. Or like a river of fire and lava. And I had just assumed Justin and Callan were not, it was only Justin and Callan, like I said, that they were not in the lake, because otherwise there'd be no way for me to find them. So I just kept looking around like the surrounding rooms until I could hear them crying. And at one point in time, I think there was like think of like a child's toy room, only everything is like demonic and devilish. The toys are covered with blood, and of course they're on fire. And Justin and Callan were just in the corner, both crying, like holding each other. And when they saw me, I don't know if they recognized me or not, because they were just in so much pain. And I just went over and grabbed them. They were both naked. Went over and grabbed them. And tried to retrace my steps, because this place was humongous. Tried to retrace my steps to back to the door, and eventually I found my way to the door. But like my shoes were completely melted, and when I was in hell, they were like wet and melted, so I could like move them. But then when I got out, they cooled off, and they were making like a noise because the rubber was sticky to the floor, because it was all melted. And Clay was like, well done, you found them. The curse is lifted, or whatever. I think I pulled out a gun and told him, if you ever hurt my family again, I'll kill you. And he just said something like, oh, I'm already dead. And we left. And we never talked about it again. I don't know what causes me to have these messed up dreams. Like, how could a little tiny snippet of a stupid video like that cause me to come up with something like that? I might have to like research into why do I have devilish nightmares, or like are there ways not to have these nightmares? Because even though I didn't like wake up in a cold sweat or anything, because I was able to get Callan and Justin, like it really would have been a terror if I couldn't find them. Even if I hadn't found them, it really would have been terrible. But like, even though I found them, like, I don't want to have dreams like this. And I don't know exactly when this kind of dreaming started. It might have been since I was a little kid, because there are some dreams that I can recall that I had when I was like 4 or 5, and they've just stuck with me. I can't remember where my keys are, but I can remember that dream that I had when I was 5, where I accidentally jumped off the Craig's Cruiser's water tower and got sucked into like a giant vacuum, you know? I'll have to see if anything can be done about this or what causes this, because I don't ever want to have a dream where my kids are in hell ever again and my buddy tries to come on to me.